We should make one thing clear. George Halas was a great friend of the Packers. No question about it. But he was mostly a friend when it was to his benefit. This story maybe illustrates it best. In 1921, for Packers' first year in the league, obviously they want to play the Bears. The team at that point, really the flagship franchise in the league. They were the Chicago Staleys, or even some were still calling them the Decatur Staleys, but they were like, if not the best team in the league, one of the best teams. And it was an opportunity to play in the big city. And the Bears, a week before the game, finally George Halas agreed to play the Packers. But he really only played them because he needed to win, because he was trying to win the second NFL championship, and he needed another victory. So he was willing to play just about anybody, and I think it just happened to be the Packers that he could entice to play a game, and they were nearby, so it wasn't going to cost them a lot of money to travel down there and play. Yet that launched the rivalry, and it's a great story, but Halas played that game more for selfish reasons than to see Green Bay survive.
So how did they wind up playing 3 games a year?
Well, and then, Halas was still, they didn't play in 22 because Halas didn't want to play him, demanded too much money. Then in 23, he agreed to play for the first time in Green Bay. That was a big boost to the Packers. And then starting in 1926, and then again for about 5-6 years from 28 to 33, the Bears and Packers played 3 times a year. And the reason for that was that the Packers were his biggest draw. And so 2 of those games were played in Chicago. One in Green Bay, where the Bears were also the Packers' biggest draw, and that game was essential to the Packers' survival. But Halas wanted to play them twice in Chicago, strictly for the gate. In '56, everybody talks about him coming up here and trying to convince the Packers, citizens of Green Bay, to pass the referendum. But in 1950, when the Packers were struggling and he wasn't drawing well, he was willing, or even asked, to play the Packer-Bear game in Milwaukee, which would just about have killed Green Bay at that point in time. And not only that, when there was realignment going on following the absorption of the teams from the All-America Football Conference after the '49 season, he suggested he wanted to move the Bears to the Eastern Conference. And not so much to avoid having to play the Packers or not having to come up to Green Bay for the small gates. I think at that point in time he was more worried about the cost of the trips to the West Coast. So whatever was in George Halas' financial interests were his #1 priority. That said, he was a good friend. But let's never forget what Mike Ditka said about him. He threw nickels around like manhole covers.